Well, now you have a reason to dance. It's the weekend. Here's your look at the brand new NECA Toony tears the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Pretty Woman Leatherface. Bring the fun of Saturday morning cartoons to your horror collection with the adorable little creeps of Toony Terrors, NECA's line of stylized horror icons. We're thrilled to kick off the 50th anniversary of the 1974 film The Texas Chainsaw Massacre with this all-new Leatherface 6-inch scale action figure. This long-awaited fan-requested version of Leatherface in his Pretty Woman look includes an iconic armadillo display base. It comes with a commemorative 50th anniversary blister card packaging with cutout cardboard backing, featuring original art by NECA painter Jeff Trapp. This is what happens when Bubba Sawyer gets dolled up for dinner. Just before we get a closer look at the brand new 50th anniversary Toony Tears Pretty Woman Leatherface, I'd like first, if I can, to thank the folks over at NECA that provided the sample we could have a look at. Good news, if you guys are interested to get your hands on this one, he's available right now either in stores or online. The Pretty Woman Leatherface is going to stand at 5.5 inches in height, or the figure is going to be 14 centimeters tall. Just recently on this channel, we had a look at the Loot Fright 2020 exclusive Bloody Toony Terrors Leatherface. You can see the differences between the two figures. That Leatherface will be booked in on both sides. In fact, here's what the figure looks like with the original Toony Terrors Leatherface. You may be looking at that and thinking, well, geez, the earlier Leatherface can't help but notice they're a little bit short on size. You have to also look at them as well, that the fact that the figures are squatting. If the fact the figure also had straight legs, I think it'd be a little bit more in scale and size with what we're getting with the Pretty Woman release. I'd be dead wrong if I omitted the artwork that we got here from NECA's talented painter, Jeff Trapp, featuring the screen door featured on the front, and of course Leatherface would be in front of that. If you flip around though to the back, you get yourself a cardboard cutout of the Sawyer farmhouse. That's a really nice way of displaying the figures. Also too, with all the Toony Terrors, you tend to always get these cardboard cutouts, so if you wanted to, you can have them displayed behind the Pretty Woman Leatherface. A nice way of, like I said, displaying the figures. Let's just move that for right now, at least out of the way. One of the many various accessories, it actually comes included with 3 if you count the display base, that come included with Leatherface. The first thing that he gets is a tiny little armadillo. Hopefully this one's not going to get run over. The armadillo has been done very well, and it doesn't have any articulation at all, but I mean, again, like, for the fact that they even took the time to sculpt the bottom of this, it's a cute little tiny armadillo. Just stay away from cars, whatever you do. I don't even know what I would name it. What would you name this tiny little armadillo? Let me know down below in the comments section. Let's move it out to the side. The figure also comes included with its chainsaw. One's following canon will recognize right away that the chainsaw is a little bit more closer colored to the way the original 74 film had it. If you're looking at the original chainsaw, what we get with the first Leatherface, first of all, as you can see, it's a lot smaller in size. It isn't just also the case that they took the original mold and shrunk it down in size. Things like the gas cap, for example, as you can see, is larger on the original release. The handle is notably also bigger, and the chainsaw teeth, while originally would have been done here in blue, it's also quite larger than the one that we're getting here for the Pretty Woman release. It does fit into its hands. It fit actually a lot easier in his hand than it does him attaching onto this display base, which is the only thing I would say as a detriment to this figure. He doesn't attach the greatest of ways onto his display base. The display base, for all intents and purposes, does attach onto his feet. But one thing I will say, though, is if you're looking at the display base terrain, first of all, I love the fact it's kind of like all old, dry mud. You can see, like, I mean, it'd be an ideal situation just to take the little tiny armadillo, whatever name we've decided to give him, and you can see you can have him just displayed on display base like that. There is a peg there, and a peg, for all intents and purposes, should plug successfully into the bottom hole of a figure. The problem with it, though, is if you're looking at the actual way they've sculpted his feet, he's posed in such a way that, first of all, he can't stand on his own. There's no way. You really do require the display base to accomplish this. What they decided to do was they put the hole on the back heel of this foot. So the foot's going to be like standing. All the weight basically is going to be on the front of the foot. The back foot, as you can see, is arched. So it's only his front toes. These little piggies are the only ones going to the market. The heel, as you can see on the back, is still sticking up. The way you have to attach it is that it obviously attaches to the hole. So right away, you're taking a peg, you're taking a hole, and you're matching the two up. It should, on paper, seem like that's a pretty straightforward thing to do. And yet, you really have to force it to get it onto his feet. A lot of times, though, his feet are also articulated, and that might also be one of the things that's a detriment to this figure. Had they chose not to make this articulate, because again, he's pre-posed anyways, I think he would have had an easier time attaching onto the display base. Again, you have to kind of have the feet completely flat. And even then, when you're having it flat, you have to put a lot of pressure to get him to actually attach onto the display stand properly. When you attach him and you feel like you're putting pressure, what you're ultimately doing, though, is you're pushing down on the heel and then you push the foot down, which right away doesn't level things up at all. I find, honestly, though, the easier route to have gone, I feel, would have been to attach the hole here, because this foot automatically is going to be already putting pressure against the base. If they had put, say, the hole here, I think it would have been a lot easier if they just attached the display base that way. Like I said, though, you do really need the display base. Without that, Leatherface cannot stand on his own. And if you don't put the proper pressure on it, then Leatherface just doesn't stand, it doesn't attach properly enough at all, and he ends up falling off the display base. I just wish that they could have found an easier way to attach this, because again, like, it's the one thing that the character does need. It's not just for aesthetics and design only. He really literally needs this display base in order to stand properly. Let's move it off to the side. One thing I do certainly like, though, is the way they've designed the figure here. He looks fantastic. If you like Toony Terrors, it would be a hard sell if you're not interested in this line at all. But if you already like the Toony Terrors, you're going to love the Pretty Woman Leatherface. He looks fantastic. Going back, though, to the chainsaw here, the way they've designed the hands are a lot easier to hold the chainsaw this time around. The first time we got Bubba, he had these really hard plastic gripping hands. He had to a lot of times pry the hands out. What they've done instead, though, as you can see, they've sort of hooked now the hands. So getting this onto the chainsaw is a lot easier to do. Now, you can have it either in the front. So again, with the hands being twistable like this, you literally just clip the hand around it, and then you just take the back hand and you just, like, well, not drop the chainsaw in the process, but you just basically take the hand, fit that around the handle like that, and then you take the back end of it and you wedge it just in place. If you keep everything in place and hopefully everything latches in place, then you should hold the chainsaw okay. It's sort of a balancing act where you have to get one hand successfully locked onto the actual handle, and then you have to do the exact same thing and hope for the best on the other side as well. Just again, like, get that around his hand. There we go. I think I did a little bit better this time around. And then just clip it around his hand like that. There we go. Now you can have him holding the chainsaw that way. You could, for all intents and purposes, too, also have the hands up. So if you want to have him, dance, of course, like he does on the path, you could do that also as well. Just looks fantastic, and I'm like the idea that they also made the colors a little bit more closer to the original 74 chainsaw, adding a little bit of that green. Let's take the chainsaw and remove it from his hands. Just put it off to the side. We're going to come back to that in final looks. I did certainly want to spend some time talking about the mask. I myself prefer the Pretty Woman mask as the ideal look to Leatherface in the 74 film. Some might prefer, though, the original Slaughter mask, and show you guys the differences with those. Now, we did, as we've already looked at earlier on this channel in the earlier end of this week, we did look at also the Loot Crate. This was the Loot Fright 2020 exclusive. The notable difference not only was the fact that he did have blood all over his apron and his hands, but he also did have his pupils looking sideways. So there's a little bit of a difference there as well. Whether you pick your poison of having the bloody version of Leatherface or you'd like to go back to the OG look of Leatherface, again, like, the only thing about it, though, is with one being squat like this, it does sort of throw the proportions off the character. Like, if they had only maybe taken the ideas of making him about the same sort of proportions to this one and just kind of had him a little bit more closer together. But I mean, like, it makes more sense that the character has straight legs like this, the way he's obviously sombering around in the old kind of farmland areas. But again, like, if you're looking at the two, they're obviously not going to be quite the same size. He's certainly a much bigger build as well on the original Toony Terrors release that we're getting here from the Pretty Woman. The Pretty Woman, though, does have the cool-looking tie. Has always been a big fan of the tie. I can't help but notice that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, that the tie looks like teeth. Or probably a saw blade. I can't tell whether it's supposed to be a saw blade or supposed to be teeth. Either way, it all has to do with eating people. The mask, again, looks really, again, quite good. You've got the little bit of blush there on the side, the lipstick on the front. Leatherface knows little about applying lipstick. I have to relate. I don't know anything about applying lipstick. Got some stitches there also on top of his face. I love the way they've got the hair blowing back like this as well. That just looks fantastic. Of course, he's now sporting for dinner time a jacket and pants. They have to match. Of course, he's got his regular top underneath that, which would be somewhat similar to the original top that he would have had as well. He's just missing his apron altogether. The posability on this guy is going to be pretty much the same as the original Leatherface. The only thing about the original one is that he had swivels in his arms. He didn't have anything in the hands. This Leatherface at least trumps that. He has a ball joint, so you can move the head up, down, and you can also move it back and forth. And of course, somewhat, you can rotate it all the way around. Just look at the detail on this. You can actually even see there's still sculpting of the face underneath the mask. Obviously, the mask can't be removable. But the arms, though, rotate all the way around. You can do the same on this side as well. They're going to be a little more hung up when they get to the back like this, so you may want to just kind of correct your path and bring them back around to the front. The hands rotate also as well. There is no waist swivel. The sculpting of his large stomach is actually sculpted the rest of his pants. But again, he does have articulation in his feet. I feel like if you were going to remove anything for articulation, I would have probably done away with the posability for his feet. Just because, again, like, he has to be posed in a way like this anyways. There's really no way around it. To give this guy then posability in his ankles, I don't think makes any sense, especially if you have to contend with the idea that this guy has to attach onto a display base, which, again, is not the easiest thing to do. It should be so straightforward because, again, you got the holes, you got the pegs, the two should line up. That's simple shapes. And yet, you really have to put a lot of pressure, it seems, to get them attached onto his feet. I still feel like the hole should have been belonging on this side of the figure's body just because, again, like, I think that would have been the easiest way to put pressure against the figure's body and then get him attached to securely attach onto the display base. I feel like I'm spending more time trying to struggle to get him onto the display base, and then once you get him onto the display base, just leave him alone. Bringing back in the two Leatherfaces that we looked at before, Leatherface plural, both Sawyers were released. One was released in the original retail version. One was released as a Fright Box, or Fright Crate 2020 exclusive. Both, again, are using the exact same molds. Just, again, with the peepers looking a little bit off to the side on the Loot Crate version. Again, nice way of displaying the figures. In a way, I still wish that they could have been a little bit more scaled in size because, again, it kind of looks like the Pretty Woman is the accurate size, and sort of we got, like, Leatherface children on either side of them. But, again, like, you have to, again, look at the way they put the posture. The posture on the original Leatherface would have been short, squat, ready to, cut into his prey. This version of Leatherface, the Pretty Woman release, has a more chasing Sally down the street, waving around his chainsaw like an absolute lunatic. Here in final looks, as we wrap up the review for the brand new Pretty Woman Toony Terrors Leatherface, you can either have the chainsaw front and center as he's chasing Sally Hardesty, or he can stop and break out in a few dance numbers and have the chainsaw waving above his head. Unlike the original 74th one that we looked at from before, this guy does possess a little bit more posability. He has more freedom to move his head. He certainly has now the freedom to move his wrists. I feel like there's one bit of articulation that never needed to be on this figure in the first place, and that's the ones in his ankles. When you get a character like this that's pre-posed and one that relies on a display stand, I don't feel like it necessarily needs to have any posability in his ankles. It's actually one thing that causes conflict, because when you're trying to put the peg into a hole, you got a peg, you got a hole, it's pretty straightforward, and yet every time you try to put pressure against that ankle, the ankle wants to move on you. I feel like in a case like that, they should have just left the ankle articulation out altogether. I don't necessarily want to glue this guy, but I feel almost even tempted to take a little bit of sticky tack and put it on the end of the peg, just to make sure that Leatherface isn't going to take a tumble. Certainly as a side note, I'm glad to see that NECA did take the time to include a little tiny armadillo. I still don't have a name for him. I was going to call him Roadkill, but I'm sure I could come up with something cuter. What kind of name would you come up with for this tiny armadillo? Let me know down below in the comments section. You can. A little bit of participation. In the meantime, though, I'd like to participate by providing, of course, a thank you to the folks over at NECA that did provide the sample of the brand new Pretty Woman Toony Terrors Leatherface that we had the chance to have a look in this review. This guy is already in stores as of right now, or you can also find this guy lurking around online. If you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more? So I hope so, because we're going to have a lot more NECA reviews in the remaining days of this week. So making sure you hit the subscribe, making sure, of course, you're doing the bell notification thingamajig. And of course, the biggest thing is that you're coming back on a regular basis. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.